all of it hinges on a young woman who in the early 20th century is told continuously what she can and can't do, when she can and can't play, has to take care of everyone except for herself, and then in the end comes to believe that she's enough and that her voice is enough and that she can play or be the way that she would like to be.
That sounds really amazing. Hi, I'm Molly Atkinson, director of Hedda Gabler this year at the Stratford Festival, and I'm talking with Thomas Morgan Jones, who is the director of Wendy and Peter Pan this year at the Avon Theatre at the Stratford Festival. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Molly.
How are you?
We did it.
We did it. Hi, Tom.
Oh, hi, Molly.
How are you, Tom?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Good. Here you are. So, should we talk about how we first met?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so we've known each other for a long time.
About a quarter century.
Yeah,
Weird,
almost.
Yeah.
Because I remember it was the year I got married and we met because you had a theater school or a theater camp that you were doing with the Charlottetown Festival. And I came and saw you at the coffee shop in Leslieville. And we sat there and I was there for a 20-minute chat and turned out to be the afternoon chatting about theater and kids and games and stuff.
Yeah.
And then we spent that summer, and we hung out in Charlottetown Festival teaching multiple kids all day, every day.
Every single day. Yeah.
Every single day.
Yeah.
It was just you and me.
Yeah.
And maybe sometimes we had some people from the festival come and teach dance or do something like that. But it was essentially just you and me and 30 kids a session.
Yeah.
And taking them. How was that for you?
That was amazing. I did that for 6 seasons there. Yeah, I feel like that summer, obviously we have a lifelong friendship now from that time.
Well, if you teach kids together, that is just the way it happens.
Yeah, this is it. But I think what's interesting is part of why we bonded though is that we love young people and working with young people and making work for young people.
Yeah.
And it was a super fun summer of trying to figure out how to engage them with theater in ways that were meaningful to them and for them.
Well, what I also liked about working with you, I think, as well, was that we had the same ideas about theater and children in theater. That you said something to me that I use all the time, is that kids are as smart as we tell them that they are, or we let them do things like Shakespeare, let them go see theater that is meant for quote unquote adults, but they get to experience it and work on it as if, why not? Why can't they work on all the big stuff? So when we put together plays and stuff at the end of the session, we always did big things. You were doing amazing things with the kids at that time. You're doing stage combat and various other things, right?
Yeah, and choral Shakespeare. We would have 40 children doing Shakespearean speeches together.
Yeah.
With choreographed actions, kind of like a Greek chorus,
yeah,
but using Shakespeare. Yeah, that was so much fun.
Well, I learned so much that summer. And then the next summer too, we did it again. And then that was really fun.
Yeah.
But I really love that. I think I learned a lot about directing from you and doing that experience.
Oh, we're going to have my friend of mine calls it competitive kindness, but I'll be but I learned so much from you directing, and it's amazing that we can be here doing these things at the same time. I feel already I've learned so much from you hearing about Hedda Gabler and it's just a continued conversation. Which,
They let anybody do this stuff nowadays, eh? It's just you and me.
Yeah.
So then how do you go from teaching children to then running a theater and then running another theater and then, and how does that work? What's the trajectory there?
Not entirely sure about the whole trajectory, but I think the piece you mentioned about how we trust children and how we honor children leads to a lot of the work I've done with theater for young audiences, which has been like well over half of my career, like playwriting, directing, any number of things, to where we are now with Wendy and Peter, which I think is like, because sometimes I'll hear people say that, you know, children are the audiences of the future, which I think is like, of course, true. And it's very important. For a lot of reasons, but children, they're the audiences of right now, right? Like they're fully three-dimensional human beings at every age they are and every developmental stage they are, and they deserve art that's been made specifically for them. And there's like, this is written in the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Like they deserve art and culture that has them specifically in mind, their experience, their life, their voice.
Well, and what I also appreciate too about the work that you do is that you don't talk down to children or suggest that large themes can't be part of the conversation. And how do we approach large themes and loss and sad, all of the things that we think, oh, no, that's too much for kids. We can't put them through that. But actually, they can really absorb all sorts of things. And so how do you approach that in your work? Like plays that most people think, oh, no, not for children. It's not right for children. Maybe, you know, they should watch something that's, you know, a little more, you know, what's the word I'm looking for?
Entertaining.
Yes.
Like
just pure. Yeah. So it's not just pure entertainment, but there is something, you know, about theater, I think, that, you know, children can really handle big stuff.
Yeah. Well, I worked on a production. It's specifically written for 5-year-olds about death. And it's called Walking the Tightrope by Mike Kenny, who's a UK playwright, which is interesting because it's a UK playwright we'll talk about later, for Wendy and Peter Pan. But and the story was basically this girl goes to visit her grandparents every summer, like at a beachside town. And she goes one summer and it's just her grandfather that picks her up. And she says, where's my grandma? And he lies to her because she's died. Right. And he says she's joined the circus.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And then, that's where he started. And then later that summer, after like lots of ins and outs and ups and downs and everything, the circus comes to town. And she says, oh, let's go, because she's the tightrope walker in the circus. And then she goes to the circus and sees the tightrope walker and sees and ends up turning to her grandfather and says, she died, didn't she? And he says, yes, she did. And then they can have a conversation about it.
Right.
And I think what was so beautiful about that play is an encapsulation for me of like what it means to talk about these big things with children, is that we don't, it's about how we approach it and how we use story to approach it.
Yep.
Like how we use, because instead of being indirect, we can be direct and say, this is the theme that we're talking about. But we don't have to go into all aspects of it, but we can go into the truth of it. And I think getting right to the truth of it honors the young person and their curiosity, because a lot of the times it's questions. Like my son, who's 7, Gabriel, 2 years ago in the bath, he turned to me, and my grandmother's name was Hilda, from Brooklyn, New York. And he turned and he said, Grandma Hilda? I said, yeah. He said, she died. I said, yeah. He said, did a shark eat her? And I said, no, a shark didn't eat her. She was just very old and she got sick and then she died. He said, oh, okay. And I thought, this is amazing, because he's thinking about sharks and he's thinking about water, and we'd been to a beach, and he's trying to put the world together. Yep. And he's asking questions and he's looking to story or to narrative, a kind of sense of how things work in the world. And so just being direct with him helped that. Now he's 7. And when he talks about her, he says, oh, I sometimes am sad because she's died and I haven't met her. And I say, well, that's okay. And then we talk about how we keep her alive by talking about her.
Yep.
And so we're still talking about the same subject. We're still being honest. We're still getting at the truth. But his developmental stage is dictating what the quality of conversation is. And I think it's the same with making theater for young people.
Yep.
Sometimes it can be like Mike's play for 5-year-olds. Sometimes it can be like Ella's play, Wendy and Peter Pan, which is for a broad, like a wide audience.
Right.
And so you have to find a way into all the ages, including the grown-ups who are a part of that audience.
Absolutely. I think that's so important, especially for like that we don't lie to the kids. We don't lie to the children at all, because in theater, I mean, I think we're after the same thing. We're always after the truth. We're always after the honesty of it and the authenticity of it. And kids deserve the same thing, I think.
Agreed.
And so I think that's kind of why we got on so well.
Yeah.
We talk about all that.
That's it.
Okay, so how did you doing this play come about for you?
Oh, excellent. Yeah, there's a program here at the Stratford Festival called the Michael Langham Workshop for Classical Direction. And they founded that in 2010. And I had the extraordinary honor and privilege of being a part of the first cohort of that. And so in 2010, in the 2011 season, I was part of the Langham program. And then because this festival is amazing at fostering people, for 13 years then, in many different forms I stayed. And because of Martha Henry and Stephen Ouimet and Anthony, I was able to teach at the conservatory for a long time and do lab experiments and all sorts of things. And then...
But how did you do that? Were you living out east at the same time?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so were you just going back and forth and back and forth?
Yeah, it was this special time of year. It was with the conservatory, often it was 1 week out of every year. And I'd fly out and be just part of the festival community for a moment and then go back to wherever I was. And but yeah, so last season, Anthony called and with the invitation to do A Wrinkle in Time and then the invitation to write A Wrinkle in Time, which was astonishing. And
well, hold on. Okay, so let's back up. So then how did that happen? Because did you suggest to Anthony, you know what, I've got this play and I really want to write it for you and that? Did you, with Wrinkle in Time, or did he say, hey, would you like to do this and maybe you can adapt it as well? And
yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Which sounds so simple, but it kind of is a decade and a half of conversations that led to it,
Right.
But it was a lot of trust to do the writing and the directing. And then I did that production. And then there wasn't currently any plans for me to be here this season. Wendy and Peter Pan was a project before the pandemic and Ciara Loughran was directing it. And then it was shut down just before Tech, or just as Tech was starting. And then the whole pandemic happened. And then they were finally able to program it again. And for a number of reasons, Ciara couldn't do it. And so they called together in the summer, in August, and said, there's going to be a change. And I think Ciara's going to have to step away from the production. And we were wondering if you would consider doing it. So it was, that was kind of it.
Right.
Yeah. Which is a big honor because, I was saying to Ciara and to Anthony, the DNA of the whole production is it's clearly composed of all of the energy and the efforts and the imagination and the hopes and dreams and thoughts and feelings of all these artists from 2020. Ciara certainly, because she was leading the project, but all the designers who are back and creating again, and all the actors, some of whom are back and some of whom aren't a part of this production. Right. You know what I mean? And all the crew members and admin people and coaches and starting to work on this project. It's I've never experienced anything quite like this because it was inheriting all of these contributions.
So if you inherit all that, then how do you put your own sort of spin on this project that you've clearly inherited, but at the same time, you're an artist, you want to kind of put your own spin on things too. How do you do that? Yeah,
collaboration, I think, listening and conversation, and offers. And I think also tons of support, tons of time with Ciara in transition, tons of time with the designers. And then a spirit of collaboration of going what is the story? Because too, when Ciara looked at it with Robin Fisher, the set and costume designer, for instance, they were already, when they picked up the conversation for 2024, looking at it differently. They were right. Oh, well, we built all these set pieces, for instance, in 2020, and we want to use some of those because they're already built, but maybe we use them in a different way, or maybe, because 4 years later, they had changed also. So
the world changed.
Yeah. So they, they sort of said to me as well, we're the whole thing is changing. So come play, right. And that's, I think, how we approached it. That's how we've gone about it.
That's really amazing. And how so you say that there are actors that were in the 2020 version and they're in this one now. And how do they sort of respond to sort of the different, how was it the first sort of week saying, and this is what we're doing now? Was that a bit...
Well, because I don't know that it was entirely I can't totally speak to it, but I think some things were similar and some things weren't. Everyone changed so much over those 4 years. So I think a lot of them came in, perhaps, I don't want to totally speak for them, but being so excited to be able to pick the project up again, but also because they had changed as people. And, I think it's like a great poem, or these Shakespeare plays that, that happen and cycle through the festival and other places. You do Romeo and Juliet and then maybe you do it again, or you see Romeo and Juliet and then you see it again. You've changed, and so you see the play differently. And I feel like it was the same for the actors, is that there's so much that resonated in the same way and so many things that were completely brand new because it's 2024 now.
Right. And so how has the process been? Like you've been here you've been here since what, like February?
Just the end of February. Yeah.
This is a long time.
Yeah.
But that's good. Like, so what is the process? I know you have a lot of action in the play, and I know you have, some really cool elements in the play. Like how's the rehearsal process been for you?
Total magic, like absolute dream come true scenario.
Right.
It's enormous. The play is enormous. There's 20 people on stage. There are over 100 fights in the play.
That is that is like a month worth of just fight rehearsal.
Yeah, totally. And
like it's just lets everybody fight for the whole month. Like, like I can't even imagine.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of achieving that, and then there's flying because it's and
then there's flying, right?
There's all that sort of piece,
great.
And set pieces and lots of costumes and what was interesting is that we tried to have 2 to 4 rehearsal rooms running simultaneously every day for well over a month.
Right.
So we would have, and so it was this. The art of scheduling, was kind of the approach to this, so that we could have a full 8-hour day of fights happening in one room, but then also have maybe like a secondary fight situation happening with some other people in another room, and then a primary room like in the main rehearsal hall that's working on the scenes for the day. But what was super fun about it is that because of the genre, and the demands of the world of the play and the energy of the play, a sense of play and wonder, I feel like, was necessary all the time. So even though it sounds a bit chaotic, it was like, okay, everybody go play in different rooms. And then at the end of it, we would always come back together into the sort of main rehearsal hall and watch at the end of every day what had been staged that day, so that everyone was watching the play as it was being made. So no matter how much time we spent apart, we would always come together for kind of like story time.
That's like summer camp.
Yeah, like summer camp. And
everybody come and like, what'd you do today? We did this.
Yeah, exactly. Come meet your play, and like we'll watch a little presentation, And that helped to, I think, anchor us and create a sense of wonder amongst all of the players, those on stage, those off stage, where they could celebrate each other's work, because it's an astonishing production, and everybody's work is so beautiful, but also so full of joy and hope, and it's contagious, So yeah, so that's been the whole process. I think I said, magic was one of the words. It feels like that. There's like a palpable sense of magic in the air.
I think that's so exciting, especially for people who, usually do not plays meant for younger audiences, but also, darker plays or whatever. Like it just is so nice to kind of come into a process where you can actually play and actually enjoy. It's hard work because, it's good work and you still have to like work your butt off. But at the same time, like just to be able to play and have that really exciting time with each other, I think is really good.
Yeah. And it's what's interesting when you say like it is hard work, and it's rigorous, and part of the rigor or the will required to do that kind of work is to remain in a state of play. You know what I mean? Like, which I think it sounds so easy. Oh, just keep playing or stay playful or stay imaginative. But I think very quickly, like we as artists can, try to lock something in or try to get to a solution or an end point.
Absolutely.
And like making any play, but with this play, it's been interesting. Like, oh, let's stage it this way. That's so fun. Okay. How else could it be? Like, where else could you go? What else could we do?
Like never stop exploring, never stop trying to find different ways of doing things. Because I think that sometimes, especially as professionals, we get stuck in, we want to make it right, we want to make it good, and we want to get to it as quickly as possible. And sometimes when we're at, different theaters, we have the luxury here of having a lot of time to really explore and, dig deep and really do great work, that people have the opportunity to try different ways. Okay, we've got it this way, but let's try this way too. And
well, I talk a lot about like draft language, which I do a lot of work. I work a lot in new play development,
right?
And I think a lot about playwrights when I'm directing in terms of their process. And I say to the actors, like, artists need time. So actors need time, and they need a process, and they need to be able to have drafts of their work that they don't have to keep, And
well, because most of the time we're looking at like our first draft, and then that's it.
But I have a playwright friend, and she says usually 30 to 40 drafts she does of a play before it meets the public. And I thought, that's so beautiful. Like, what if we think about directing that way? What if we think about acting that way? That, as you say, it's not about like trying to get to it. It's more like, what is the process that we're in? Like, what are we learning from each other? What are we learning from the text? What are we learning about the world of the play? And to trust that it will take drafts, and that we're only ever exactly where we should be, not like where we're trying to get to. We can't get there right away.
I think that's exactly right. And I feel like sometimes actors, as a director, right? Like sometimes they look at you and go, okay, what am I supposed to do? You're like, let's try a bunch of stuff. And they kind of want you to have the first thing you think of is like exactly what it's supposed to be, end of, stamped it, that's it. And you kind of want to inspire them to be like, no, we can do all sorts of different things. The first thing isn't the first thing we need to do, like that's not the one we want to get to. Yeah. I think that's really interesting, because also when you don't have the luxury of time, you do have to kind of go with your first thing and hope for the best. Hopefully it's what you wanted.
Yeah.
But that's really exciting. So we all know the story of Peter Pan. Most people, it's been around forever. I don't know exactly how long, but anyway, it's endured it's been movies, it's been cartoons, it's been plays, it's been musicals, it's been all the things. Tell me about this adaptation. What is different about this adaptation or not?
Totally, for sure. On the history piece, it's interesting because the play premiered 120 years ago this year. So
really?
we get an anniversary year on this one,
fancy,
which is exciting. And what's like fun too, I feel about it, like I read this story about the first actor who played Peter, and how when in the scene where in that instance it was called Tinkerbell from the original story, and when Tinkerbell dies, spoiler alert to anybody that doesn't know, but so when Tinkerbell dies, and then the only way to revive her is for the audience to clap, and if you believe in fairies, then you'll clap, and then Tink will come back to life. When this moment happened, like, they were experimenting with theatrical form. So they were trying audience participation, and they had no idea if it would work.
Right.
So like the manager of the theater went to the orchestra, because it was like back when orchestras would, like, there'd be a full orchestra playing live for the soundscape. And they said, listen, when Tink dies, everybody put your instruments down. And in the event that no one in the audience claps, then all of you just have to, fill the space with your clapping. And so, but then it got to the moment. And then she said, like, if you believe in fairies, clap your hands. It's like hard to talk about without crying. It's like the whole audience, like, wah! And then apparently the actor playing Peter, she started crying. And in this thing I read, I mean, I wasn't there, but apparently it was a two-part crying. Like, one was from relief that it started laughing, happened. But the other was like pure wonder that everyone believed so much in their story that they clapped to save this fairy from dying. It's just like so beautiful.
Well, this is the magic of theater, and this is why we do what we do, right?
Yeah.
The fact that, you can go see a play and people are listening and into it, and, even though they've seen that story however many times, that they still believe in the magic and they buy in right from the get-go.
Yeah.
And I think that is so spectacular, and that's the human connection that we're all sort of searching for every time we come to the theater.
Yeah.
I think that's really exciting.
Yeah. And then so like with this adaptation now, what's interesting is so like that moment exists in this play, and there's so much, like, so an audience who is familiar with Peter Pan, the story, can come see the play, and they'll recognize like everything in some ways that they know, like all the characters and situations and the nursery and the crocodile, all these things. But it feels to me totally different because Ella's changed the story a bit, and she's changed the mythology of Peter Pan a bit. And when Anthony Cimolino, the artistic director of the Stratford Festival, talks about it, I've heard him say many times that he feels like this is one of those rare occasions where the adaptation improves upon the original. And I'm of the same mind for a lot of reasons. And, this is also a spoiler alert, but what Ella's done is, in the book and most plays, there are 3 darling children. There's Wendy, and then she has 2 brothers, John and Michael. In this play, what Ella's done is she added a 4th darling child called Tom. And I can't talk about it without crying.
Oh no,
I know. And then so at the beginning of the play, like
Yes.
really like right near the beginning of the play, Tom dies. He becomes sick and then he dies.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I know. So it's interesting that like talking about like Mike Kenny's play before, but it's like, so Tom passes away. And so then now there's this family is in grief, and Wendy is looking out the window often. It's a year later. She's looking out the window and she sees this boy flying around,
Right.
which is, amazing. But
my God.
what's interesting is she wonders, is it my brother, in a hope or like in a kind of, as she's moving through the stages of grieving, not accepting that her brother is gone and going, oh, maybe that's Tom. Eventually, Peter comes into the room and she meets Peter, and she's disappointed that it's Peter because she was hoping it was Tom. And then Peter, because like Peter's going on about all sorts of things about Neverland and then says lost boys. And what she hears is lost boys and goes, oh, maybe Tom's lost. And she says, where are these lost boys? Where are you from? What are you talking about? And when Peter brings up Neverland, then it's unlike other adaptations or unlike the original, Wendy quests to Neverland to find her brother. Mm-hmm. So it's Wendy that is the catalyst for everything. And the play, too, called Wendy and Peter Pan, like it's entirely through the lens of Wendy, and she drives it. So they go to Neverland to find Tom. And what's different about the mythology of the story is that in this story, gonna try not to cry, is when a child...
This is a highly emotional podcast.
That's it. When a child passes in this story, Peter arrives and takes them to the sky, and they become a star. And the reason the stars shine...
Sorry, let's not look at each other.
Yeah, the reason the stars shine is because they're reflecting their mother's tears.
Oh my God. I can't... Why are you telling me this? Like, I can't see this play.
I know. So
I can't bring my kids to see this play. I'm just going to be like, they're like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah. And then, so the idea is that when every person who's loved that child has their very first happy... as their very first happy thought.
Yes.
Then Peter goes to the sky.
Yes.
Takes them from being a star, and they become a lost boy.
Oh my God. Tom, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I cannot wait to see that. That is totally my jam.
Yeah. And then they can play forever. So it's a kind of, like it's amazing.
Right.
So, so with these two moves that she made, one is Wendy being, the one that drives the story. Mm-hmm. But to make that happen in the inciting incident being Tom passing away and then changing the mythology of the story is that we then, for me, like the way I've been describing it is, what is the play about? It's about so many things, but ultimately, Wendy quests to Neverland to find her brother, and what she finds is herself. And she finds empowerment in her own voice. I know it's a tough one, eh? And so because there are so many themes, in Peter Pan, and this has all of those, like time and aging and childhood and friendship. For me, the theme that binds everything in this adaptation is home. And I feel like every home in the play is in turmoil somehow. Like in London, England, there's been this passing. In Neverland, there are multiple parts of Neverland, but like the Lost Boys are, the pirates are after them, and the pirates are all unsettled and clearly unhappy, and a big metaphor for colonialism. And it's just like everybody's really quite unhappy. And then slowly over the course of the play, all of the homes get restored or come to a kind of balance over the play. But all of it hinges on a young woman who in the early 20th century is told continuously what she can and can't do, when she can and can't play, has to take care of everyone except for herself. And then in the end comes to believe that she's enough, and that her voice is enough, and that she can play or be the way that she would like to be.
That sounds really amazing. Yeah,
so that's kind of the adaptation. It's written by Ella Hickson, should say. And she's brilliant, and it's absolutely astonishing.
That sounds. And so have you had any audiences yet?
Not yet. We have an invited dress this coming Saturday, so that's the first time. But we've had a lot of guests, which has been amazing. And so I feel like I have been able to watch it through new eyes or witnesses. Yeah. And it's been very powerful to see their reactions, because even as we work on technical things, and even as we work on this, or people have come to me, fully like you and I just were.
Like us.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Saying, oh, that's so, because they're filled with wonder and joy, and they've laughed and they've had like all sorts of adventures. But ultimately, I think the core of the story is really hitting them, watching like this really beautiful ending.
I'm trying not to draw like parallels to Hedda Gabler, because they're the only Hedda Gabler. The only parallel is that a woman in the early 20th century. Oh. Anyway, what's it like to, go from running a theater to now you're here and just being able to direct a play? Is that sort of nice to sort of just work on the creative side of things? Or like, how do you juggle all of the different jobs that you're doing currently? And go.
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting about artistic direction and also directing is I think they're service positions, like you get to express your voice, and certainly like your taste or curiosity or interest comes into play as a part of it. But you're, as an artistic director, you're in service to communities, or whatever the community of the theater is, to the artistic community, to audiences, to past, present, and future generations of all of the above. I think with directing, we're in service in the same way, but maybe slightly different groups and with a slightly different focus. But we're in service to the story. We're in service to the script and the play. We're in service to all of the collaborators that we have. And that's in the rehearsal hall, outside the rehearsal hall, like administrative staff, like everybody that help us to make this play, because they're all collaborators. So I think part of the it's challenging sometimes to do multiple jobs at the same time. But I think what makes it easy are the guiding principles, morals, ethics, or philosophy and values about how you want to work and how to prioritize people and process first. And with that in mind, that helps to know what to prioritize and what actions to take when, I think.
Right. What are some fond memories that you're going to take away with you after doing this production? Is there anything that you any fun things and fond memories that you have of so far of working on Wendy and Peter Pan?
Yeah. They'll have to cut me off. I have so many.
Are you going to cry again?
No. But I cry all the time. You probably.
Am I going to cry again?
Yeah. Yeah, but I will if I talk. Yeah, because it's... every square inch of the process has been so beautiful and so collaborative. I think the main thing that I'll take away is that feeling. Okay, in categories, the flying.
Yeah, can you talk to me about that? Because I am amazed at that whole concept of flying and the uber technical nature of that, but at the same time making it artistic and beautiful and all of the things, because it has to be, incredibly technical, but at the same time, beautifully, artfully done so that it's magical and all these things. So, yeah.
So, I mean, in a way, like talking about flying might encapsulate the things that make up, like the theme that makes up all of the memories, which is like collaboration and all of the beautiful human beings that, have helped put it together. The flying is done by a company called ZFX, and they're from America. And it was Andrea and Tackett were the two people that were working with us from ZFX. And so they came up from the States to work with the crew at the Avon and with all of us. And those conversations began in September. And so it was, okay, we've got to plan this a lot ahead of time, which means we needed to storyboard the entire play and how it was going to work flying wise, without having done rehearsals or anything yet.
And do you work like that usually?
Not normally. But what was great about it is I was able to say, these are impressions I have or thoughts I'm having. And then we could talk about like what might be possible, what might not be possible. Right. And then the more we learned, the more we applied that knowledge, et cetera, et cetera. Right. But immediately it was a conversation between ZFX, myself, the set designer, the stage manager, and the entire crew at the Avon Theatre, who are the crew there is remarkable. And among them is this person, Chris Kinnar. So shout out to Chris Kinnar. So what Chris was able to do was he created a 2-dimensional computer program. I feel very old now. I just said computer program, but like it's a
computer program.
Yeah. And, but in it, he was able to do a 2-dimensional mapping of all of the flights that we described so that we can watch them on a big screen screen with the friends down in America and our team here and the Avon team and watch the flight paths that we wanted to set, including timings, including everything.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so that when we got into the room with everybody live at the Avon, then we could plan all that out. And what's interesting about this flying is that sometimes when people hear about flying in plays, one way of doing it is that there are people like holding fly lines and pulling them and hoisting the people into the air. This one is entirely automated on a computer system. So whatever Chris and Andrea set on this computer program, and that's how it's run through automation, is exactly what happens every time. So it's like always, you know, the line comes down, the actor gets pulled up, the line goes to tension, so it just brings them just up a little bit just before they're going to fly, and then their flight track is the exact same every time, the exact same timing, the exact same pressure, so the actors can get to know like how they are in the harness, how to breathe, how to perform, all of that. So we set all of the flying for the show, first draft of it, in the second week of rehearsal before we had done really like the whole play, because that was how it had to be done. But it also gave us a first draft very early. Right. And then we got to have all of the impressions and input from all of the actors, whether it's those that are playing the roles or understudies or any number of people, to go, okay, well, this is how the flying feels. This is the story of the flying. This is, you know, and so a lot of the first drafts that we started with is not what we've ended up with going into performance, but that kind of change, it's come from so many different people. Like sometimes a designer will say, oh, what if, or an actor will say, oh, what if, or could we, or Chris will say, what if, or could we, or also can't do that because like we need the time to X, right? There's all sorts of people watching it for safety. There's, you know, there was one day where the team, they do checks like every day because, as Andrea says to the people who are, we call it hooking and unhooking people, she says, remember, when you hook someone up, you're the last point of contact before a human being goes 30 feet into the air. And so there was one day they did a little check and they found the tiniest little bump on the tiniest little cord of one of the little lines, and they shut all the flying down. And then ZFX came up from the States and they redid the whole flying rig just to make sure everybody was safe. So it's the making of this play, and the memories that I'll take is that there is complete artistic and heartfelt and craft-based buy-in from every single human being who is a part of this production. And I mean everybody from every department. And the flying is one of those things that's brought us together. But I think so is the story, you know? So I don't know if that's a memory. I guess those are a couple of memories. They're all about flying. Those are pretty good. Yeah.
Okay, so the first day of flying. Talk to me about the first day the actors got hooked into the flying.
Oh yeah, so good.
Yeah, tell me about that. That I would, because that makes me like I'm sweating just thinking about the idea of going up.
Well, everyone was it's so interesting because we were all like children. So those of us that were present, you know, so the first thing they would do is they fly the bags. So it's like these weighted bags.
Right.
And then they had these weighted duffel bags. So it's like duffel bags that are weighted to be as heavy as people. And then they fly duffel bags around and you watch the duffel bag show. And then they hook all the people up.
Yeah.
And the first time that someone went up, like what's amazing about flying, and you know, the children will know, like they'll see a cord in the show and all that sort of thing, but it's like,
yeah, but we know, but at the same time, you don't know, like you never see people up in the air like that.
No, well, you forget because suddenly a human being is 18 feet in the air.
100%.
And it's awe-inspiring, like without any tricks, without any flips, without any of that. It's like to watch someone ascend into vertical space, 18 feet in the air, your jaw unhinges, and all of us were giddy. Like what I remember most from that time was the suspension of breath, like everyone going and giggles.
Yeah,
it's constant giggles, like giggles from the floor, being like, "Oh my goodness, that is so beautiful. I don't know what to do."
Yeah,
and also the people in the air, like at first joyous or nervous giggling.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? And then eventually giggling with sort of a kind of freedom of expression. You know, because the more that they become accustomed to doing it, the more they fill it and they perform with it and they can start to anticipate it and they start to add gesture and they start to, you know, but the very first time I've tried to say to the cast, and everybody on the production, is that you can never get back your first impression. And I think it's so important to remember it. So and I appreciate the question, to be able to remember the flying for the first time. Same thing the first time they wore costumes. I said, you'll never get to meet the people on stage with you for the first time ever again. So really, even if it throws the scene, and I remember when Justin, who plays Michael, woke up for the first time and put on his glasses and saw Nestor, who plays Tink, and totally started laughing. And then the line kind of went and then came back. And it was one of the most, I'll remember it for the rest of my life. Actually, that's a memory. It was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen because he took in Nestor and went,
wow.
Yeah. So.
Well, that's absolutely, like the first day with costumes is the most exciting. It's almost like Christmas, right? Everybody comes, it's almost, or prom, I should say, maybe it's more like prom. Everybody comes and looks beautiful. And then, you finally see all these people that you've been, they used to wear track pants and now they're wearing like this gorgeous 3-piece suit.
Yeah,
and you're like, oh my gosh, there you are.
Yeah.
Like that's exciting and special. Yeah. Okay. What do you hope families take away from this production of Wendy and Peter Pan?
That's a great question.
Or what do you hope they talk about on the ride home, or the kids talk about on the ride home, or the whole family, really?
Yeah, I got like a 3-parter to that. One is that I hope for families or children and anyone that they brought with them when they leave, that I hope it's a memory for life they can hang on to. Like the whole experience, like being at the show, but like being in Stratford, like the time before, whatever meal they had, the walk they had, the water, the whole experience. For children, I hope it's 2 things. One, like one of the reasons I believe in theater for young audiences is that, like much like Wendy experiences at the end of the play, is that my hope is that they feel seen and that they feel empowered in the knowledge that their voices matter, their stories matter, and that we made this for them because they're important, and because we love them. So I hope they can take that away and like that can inspire and excite them. And I also hope that they leave being super inspired by the overall size and spectacle of the piece. Like I hope their socks are knocked off. Do you know what I mean? That they go, what was that? Because it's the production has a kind of, I mean this in a really loving, beautiful way, but it's audacious. Like it has an audacity to it because it's big, and there's all the fights and the flying and the thing and the music and
kids are gonna eat it up.
Yeah, that they can leave going, wow, scale, spectacle, but that all of it is rooted in the empowerment of children's voices is so like absolutely extraordinary. But so is something that sizable, and I think in this time to make a play that large in this place that is specifically for children is amazing.
Yeah, I think it's really special, and kids can come with their families and they can go see this play and know that it was made for them, with them in mind. I think just really amazing. And it sets them up to come back again and again and again and realize that theater is for everyone. And, and then next time maybe they want to try a different play, go see 2 next year or whatever. I think it's pretty fabulous.
Thanks, Molly.
Thanks, Tom. Good job, Tom.
We've kind of taken the myth and debunked everything and gone, Shakespeare, And he's dressed in leather and he's a rock star. He's a cross. I keep saying he's a cross between, Mick Jagger, sort of Johnny Depp from Pirates, and a little bit of Harry Styles. You know what I mean?